Greetings, aspirants. Hope you all are doing well. The Supreme Court on October 16th referred the challenge to the validity of the Electoral Bond scheme, which facilitates anonymous donations to political parties, to a constitution bench of 5 judges. A bench led by the Chief Justice of India is set to hear final arguments in the case on October 31st. The case has been pending in the Supreme Court for over 8 years now, and its outcome is expected to have a significant bearing on the Lok Sabha elections scheduled to take place next year. So, in this context, we'll first talk about the electoral bonds and then we'll talk about various issues surrounding it. Now, why was the scheme launched at all? See, the electoral bond scheme was first introduced by former Finance Minister Arun Jaitley during the 2017 budget session. It was framed as an initiative to cleanse the system of political funding in the country and make political donations transparent. Prior to the introduction of the scheme, political parties were required to make all donations above 20,000 rupees public, and no corporate company was allowed to make donations amounting to more than 10% of their total revenue. Now, what is an electoral bond? See, electoral bond would be a bearer instrument in the nature of a promissory note and an interest-free banking instrument. A citizen of India or a body incorporated in India will be eligible to purchase the bond. Know that the electoral bond will be issued or purchased for any value in the multiples of 1000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees, 10 lakh rupees and 1 crore rupees from the specified branches of the State Bank of India. Know that the purchaser would be allowed to buy electoral bonds only on due fulfillment of all extant KYC norms and by making the payment from a bank account. It will not carry the name of the payee. Also, electoral bonds would have a life of only 15 days, during which it can be used for making donation only to the political parties registered under Section 29A of the Representation of People's Act of 1951 and which secured not less than 1% of the total votes polled in the last general election to the House of People or a legislative assembly. Also, the bonds under the scheme shall be available per purchase for a period of 10 days each in the months of January, April, July and October, as may be specified by the central government. An additional period of 30 days shall be specified by the central government in the year of the general election to the House of People for the purchase of bonds. The bond shall be encashed by an eligible political party only through a designated bank account with the authorized bank. If a party does not encash any bonds within this period, the SBI deposits them into the Prime Minister's Relief Fund. There is also no cap on the number of electoral bonds that a person or the company can purchase. Now, why is the scheme facing a challenge in the Supreme Court? See, 2 petitions challenged India's electoral bond scheme in the Supreme Court. One was filed jointly by the Alternative Dispute Redressal and Common Cause in 2017 and the other by the Communist Party of India Marxist in 2018. The petitions raise concerns about the unlimited and anonymous political donations by Indian and foreign companies, potential electoral corruption, and violations of the right to know, which comes under the Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A of the Constitution. They objected to Foreign Contribution Regulation Act FCRA amendments, allowing foreign companies with Indian subsidiaries to fund Indian parties, potentially exposing politics to international influence. Amendments to the Companies Act exempted companies from disclosing political contributions, increasing funding opacity. Also, amendments to the Representation of People's Act exempted political parties from disclosing electoral bond contributions to the Election Commission, harming transparency. The Finance Acts of 2016 and 17, passed as money bills, bypassed Rajya Sabha scrutiny, raising concerns about democratic checks and balances. Then, in November, the Ministry of Finance extended the bond sale period during election years, despite objections from the officials who believed Election Commission of India clearance was needed due to Model Code of Conduct. This highlights concerns about transparency, political funding, and legislative processes in the India's electoral system. Now, what are the concerns raised by the Election Commission of India? See, in a 2019 affidavit submitted to the Supreme Court, the Election Commission of India expressed grave concerns about electoral bond system. The ECI warned that it would undermine transparency in the political funding, potentially allowing foreign corporate influence in Indian politics. It also cautioned that amendments to key laws could enable creation of shell companies solely for political donations, rendering ECI's guidelines from 2014 meaningless. The ECI had previously advised the Ministry of Law and Justice against these amendments in May 2017, emphasizing the need to declare political party donations for transparency and accountability in elections. The ECI opposed the amendment to the Representation of Peoples Act, which allowed political parties to avoid disclosing donations received through electoral bonds, deeming it detrimental to donation transparency and calling for its withdrawal. Additionally, the ECI urged the ministry to ensure that only financially sound companies with a proven track record be allowed to make political donations. This underscores the ECI's concerns regarding electoral bonds and their impact on the electoral process in India. Now, why does RBI object this? See, the ADR's plea highlighted the Reserve Bank of India's warnings against electoral bonds, which could lead to increased black money circulation, money laundering, counterfeiting, and forgery. The RBI referred to electoral bonds as opaque financial instruments and raised concerns about their potential use in money laundering. The RBI emphasized that while the purchaser would comply with the KYC requirements, intermediaries' identities would remain unknown, undermining the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. The RBI suggested that the government's goal of channeling political funding through formal banking channels could be achieved through traditional means like checks, demand drafts, or the electronic payments. Now, how has the government defended the scheme? The government defends electoral bonds, stating they boost transparency in the political funding by allowing parties to encash them through authorized banks, maintaining donor and recipient anonymity through hidden serial numbers. What has the Supreme Court said so far? See, before the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, petitioners sought Supreme Court intervention to halt electoral bond issuance or reveal donor names for election transparency. The court didn't halt the scheme but ordered parties to submit donor and contribution information through electoral bonds to the Election Commission confidentially. Then in March 2021, the petitioners requested a stay on the bond sales before state assembly elections, which the court declined, citing prior sales and online bond anonymity checks. Then the court categorized the petitions into three groups which are challenging the scheme, bringing the parties under the Right to Information Act and contesting FCRA amendments. Later, petitioners asked for the matter to be referred to a constitutional bench due to its significant impact on democracy and party funding. On October 10th, the court focused on legalization of anonymous donations to parties and the violation of right to information about party funding, leaving the money bill aspect aside. Now the final arguments will center on anonymous political funding and the right to information, with a plea to expedite a decision before the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. So we have talked about electoral bonds, then we have seen why is it facing a challenge in the Supreme Court, then the views of different stakeholders on this, and finally we have seen what's the issue in the present context. We'll be back again with another topic. Thank you.